What's up, everyone? Welcome to FAM Sports New York Varsity. I'm your host, Frank Langella, joined by my co-host, Marsilio Langella. Mars, we have hit week 5. We have a couple weeks left. I believe it's 3 weeks left in the regular season before playoff time. Season's flying by, man, and we're starting to look at these matchups, these league games, and these standings as we get closer to playoffs.
Yeah, man, the fact is that we're really getting into the playoff, the playoff brackets. We're getting to the final crunch of who's going to make the playoffs and who's not. And you can already kind of see the landscape of who's the top team to beat, who's going to be a possible sneak-in team, and then you're going to see some teams that might get bounced out based on the performance of this week. So it's going to be really interesting. It's really interesting to see what happens next.
Absolutely. I want to welcome our audience. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. As always, if you're new, welcome. We cover Section 1 football. And what's going to happen in this show is we're going to talk about some of the games that are on slate. We're going to talk about the standings, and I'm going to ask my boy Mars here any surprises that he's had so far this season. Obviously, things can change. Then we'll talk about We'll do a couple breakdown of some top matchups and pick all the games at the end. But before we do that, I do want to say if I sound a little bit slow or not as energetic as I used to, I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, so I do apologize for that. And please make sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe if you like this content and to get future content. Also, if you would like to donate to our cause, you can become a Patreon, which is in our description below, where you can get some added benefits from that. Or if you want to make a one-time donation as well, there's also a link below for that. And we appreciate all donations from our fans. We are a grassroots group, so we appreciate our fans. You can also get access to our website at famsportsny.com. But let's dive into it, Mars. Games on slate: RCK at Arlington. That's a big rivalry there. Mamaroneck at North Rockland. Ossining at Rochelle. John Jay's Fishkill at Scarsdale. Mount Vernon at Carmel. White Plains at Yonkers Brave. Suffern at Yonkers Force. And when we look at the standings, Mars, again, I don't know the names of the specific. I'm just calling them League A and League B. There's 6 league games total. So let's start on the A side. Carmel's 4-0. They're 3-0 in league play. Again, only played 3 games in league play. So they have 3 more league games headed up, including this week. And then we have a 2-way tie. Well, really, if we're talking losses, 3-way tie between Mount Vernon, North Rockland, and Arlington. Mount Vernon and North Rockland are 3-1 in league play, Mars. Arlington is 2-1 in league play, so they still have a few league games to go. But a bit surprising there. All at 3-1. Now they have different records. Mount Vernon's 3-1, North Rockland 3-2, Arlington 2-3. But again, league record is most important for the first tiebreaker. Then it's going to be overall, then head-to-head and overall record and stuff like that. Then it's Yonkers Force is at 1-3 in league play, 2-3 overall. Suffern is 1-3, 0-3 in league play, and RCK 0-4 and 0-3 in league play. On the other side, Mamaroneck 4-0. They're 4-0 in league play. They have clinched a playoff berth, so the magic number is 4, Mars. It clinches a playoff berth for them. They're 4-0 in league play. Scarsdale, John Jay's Fishkill, Rochelle, and Ossining, Mars, all tied at 2-1 in league play. So obviously these games that I mentioned before are going to get really big. But Scarsdale's 3-1, East Fishkill's 3-1, Rochelle is 3-2 overall, and Ossining's 3-2. Followed up by White Plains, who's 0-3 in league play, 0-4 overall, and Yonkers Brave, who's 0-5 and 0-4 in league play. Mars, you know, a lot has gone on this season. Real quick, any surprises for you or any team that kind of stands out so far this season? Obviously things can change, but who has kind of surprised you or stood out to you?
Well, there's a few. I think if I'm looking at I think Arlington is surprising. I think the fact that, you know, they're one of the biggest schools in AA, right? And, you know, there was a lot of hype going behind this team, and we actually hyped them up ourselves because we both said that they were going to have a lot of kids that were big in size, a lot of skill. And right now that they're tied with a 3-way tie between North Rockland, and the other big surprise for me is Mount Vernon doing as well as they are, and not saying anything bad against Mount Vernon, but generally in the past they have not done to the same level as they normally have this year. And I said this a few weeks ago. I was like, hey, this new stadium, man, it must have some juices.
They only played it once.
I know, but they must have some motivation to continue that run, because, you know, obviously we all know the Memorial Field is you know, where they used to have the section title all the time, and maybe that's their driving force to say, hey, you know, at one point maybe it will return and they will want to play in it, right? I think that would be kind of a driving force for them. But it is a surprise to see Mount Vernon to the top level. I think also I would say from B, Ossining is a surprise to see them kind of tied with, as you said, Scarsdale and John J. Fishkill.
And
Rochelle. Boy, tie in B. I mean, that's right now. There's always, this week in general is always with a spot where you might see some big changes in the brackets because, like you said before, it looks like other than Carmel and Mamaroneck, everybody else is kind of around that same level, right? And it looks like they're all kind of competing for who's number 2, right? I think Carmel and Mamaroneck right now look at just leading the pack in offense and defensive of efficiency. So I kind of want to see, what happens this week because that will really see what changes. But I think it is surprising to see like Arlington and Mount Vernon, North Rockland all tied, and just the amount of ties that we have right now is just surprising.
Yeah, and I'll say this about my surprise. Scarsdale, I think, again, was a big X factor coming into this season. I know they had a tough loss leading most of the game last week, but Scarsdale sitting at 3-1, 2-1 in league play. I knew East Fishkill would be improved. I knew Mamaroneck would be good. But Scarsdale kind of shooting up and competing in that is a pretty big one. And as for Arlington, the good news is, Mars, 2 of their losses are non-league, right? It was a week 0 loss, and they lost to Scarsdale, which is non-league. Their only league loss is to Carmel. And we know, last week was, I don't think that game was sanctioned by Section 1. That was an ugly one. But the good news is they can respond and bounce back, right? So, let's move on to now some of the top matchups heading into this week. Let's start with Suffern, 1-3, who's 0-3 at Yonkers Force, who's 2-3 and 1-3 in league play. Both these teams still trying to climb their way back into the playoff hunt. We mentioned them in the standings, Mars. League game, the loser of this game will be eliminated from the playoff spot. So, again, the magic number is 4, right, to clinch it. When you get 3 wins, you need help, right? There's tiebreakers now is going to get involved. So, interesting dynamic here. Suffern lost at Mount Vernon. Yonkers Force lost versus North Rockland. And let's start with Suffern, Mars. Penalties, turnovers have been brutal. They lost the last 2 games by a combined 9 points. And starting on the offensive side of the ball, they're number 12th out of 14. It's just been a lot of inconsistency. Now, last week, I didn't see Dorcelli play. I saw him dressed. He didn't play. Him not playing is obviously huge. And then they had to rely on Jeff Joseph, who actually played really well. He had 2 touchdowns last week. He really had to carry the load. And their quarterback, Palumbo, he got banged up. He came back in. He had about, I think, 3 touchdown passes. Cam Lou had a touchdown reception, but he got hurt. I didn't see him come back. Lutz had a touchdown reception. Chrysler, he had a kick return for a touchdown. Jackson Bloom, he made a lot of plays. But it's like the same thing over and over on this offense. Penalties that kill drives, turnovers that change the momentum has really hurt Suffern's offense. And going into Yonkers Force, Mars, they got to try to run the ball, all right? And I'm interested to see if Dorcelli's running. If he is, that's a huge boost for that offense. And Joseph, that tandem's got to be, getting a bunch of carries. And passing has to be complementary to it. Saw some good things in the passing game, but the turnovers, Mars, are absolutely brutal. Defensively, listen, the focus has to be stopping quarterback Alvin Martinez and preventing those big plays in the passing game. I thought they did a relatively good job against the pass last week versus Mount Vernon. At times, they were getting run against. So I'm interested to see how Yonkers Force attacks them running the ball. But up front, Rajkovic, Chrysler, Warren at the linebacker spot, Lutz, they're going to have to step up. I think this secondary can match up pretty well. When you have Harris, Snell, Bloom, Bullock, they have some guys in the back end who can make plays, right? It's can they stop the run, get ahead of the chains? It's going to be big, Mars. What are your thoughts on Suffern?
Yeah, look at Suffern. I agree with you that the biggest issue they have is just being consistent. I think the problem is that their penalties really force them to lose these really short, really close games, right? And I think that's kind of the key thing. They've been having these penalties and just key turnovers. You got to be consistent. You got to be safe with the ball. And I think that the fact is that if they can limit that, this is going to do wonders for their offense because they've just been really hurting themselves every single chance they had. And I think that at the end of the day, they need to try to develop a run game, create some consistency again, really develop a pacing that allows them to really open up more of their playbook, right? And I think defensively, it's just about, like you said, they need to stop the run, but I think the pressure is going to be on their secondary to really limit the big passes that they're going to have to go up against with Yonkers Force, because they've shown that they can pass pretty well, and I think have been pretty consistent this season so far. So it's going to be a test on their secondary if they can really close down the gap here, right? If they can really slow down this pass offense.
Yeah, and when we go to Yonkers Sports Bar, they have lost 3 straight, so it's kind of been a bit of a bump in the road. And offensively, they've scored less than 14 points now, 2 out of the last 3 games. Quarterback Martinez has been pretty steady. He had 2 touchdowns last week. Now I think he's had a touchdown in every single game. But can they get the run consistent, right? I mean, Mount Vernon had opportunities, and they ran pretty well downhill against Suffern at times. And I'm going to see Yonkers Force can try to repeat that, go into some heavy looks, run downhill with Martinez, see if they can establish the run as well. And I think it will open up some one-on-one opportunities. Suffern is not easy to pass against, right, because of that secondary that I mentioned. I thought Snell for Suffern was pretty good, and I think they're going to probably match him up against Aquino, right? But you got to take chances. You got to go up. You got to try to create some of these big pass plays. That's what's been, that's what was successful for Yonkers Force earlier in the season, right? Is getting those big pass plays and then running the ball, right? So, I think that is the formula they have to protect up front. They got to try to hit these one-on-one matchups. It's going to be extremely important. Defensively, listen, they're tied for 6th in points allowed, right? This is not a bad unit. It starts, again, stopping the run. Interested to see if Dorcelli plays. If not, you still have to stop Joseph, who had a really strong game last week. They gave up 189 yards rushing, which is not terrible, but not very good either. So you know that they're going to be trying to run against them. Big chunk run plays are going to hurt. Again, I'm expecting to see some heavy 2-back, heavy sets with Suffern, maybe 1 tight end, 2 tight ends, some wildcat stuff, and then spread you out. So they'll mix it up, but I think they're going to try to test if they can bang around with Yonkers Force. So the front 7 for Yonkers Force is going to be huge in this one. Mars, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, when I look at Yonkers Force, I think offensively, I mean, they've had some struggles on losses. Just 3 straight in a row is really tough. Really, any team to bounce back from, but they really need to try to look at what they do best. And I think consistently their quarterback play has been doing very well. They've been scoring at least 1 touchdown a game in the last 3 games, and I think that they need to try to at least establish the run a little bit more, try to open up so they can get some matchups on the outside when it comes to the receivers against a good secondary. I mean, the problem is that, obviously Suffern's going to have some good guys in the back end, but the question is going to be, if you can develop the run, that means they'll have to limit any sort of zone coverages. And now, like you said, you're going to have to try to pick apart some man-to-man, right? And you have to make the right throws. And we've seen that happen before with Yonkers Force. They've been able to make good throws. So it's going to be a good question. But I think that really the offensive line is going to have a day. I think they're going to have to make some big plays, open up the lanes for the running game. Defensively, I think, like you said, they need to stop the run and really just try to limit any sort of big plays that Suffern has. I think if they do that, force certain turnovers, and I think at the end of the day, they'll get the offense back on the field, make some more plays.
Let's go to the next matchup. Mars Mamaroneck, 4-0 at North Rockland, who's 3-2. This is a non-league game, so not going to affect the standings, but I think a pretty good barometer of where these 2 teams are. Mamaroneck, they won versus Brave last week. North Rockland won at Yonkers Force. When you look historically, Mars, North Rockland 9-0 versus Mamaroneck since 2004, and they have last played 2019. So it's been a couple of years, but North Rockland has owned this series. And let's start with Mamaroneck, Mars. They have won the last 2 games by a 78-20 margin. Mamaroneck really is rolling on both sides of the ball. Offensively, this is the number 2 offense in points scored. They have scored 35-plus points now in 4 games. It was good to see Hamilton back, Mars. 2 rushing touchdowns last week. Him running with Ramsey, who a couple weeks ago was kind of that Superman running the ball. And then obviously the quarterback Cox, who is probably in the running for MVP of AA. He had a passing touchdown last week. They have that really strong, run-pass option, and they have weapons on the outside. I tell you what, Rhett Chambers, Mars, he had a touchdown last week as well. He has been a guy who's been very reliable to them throwing the football, and they have other guys. So to him, you could tell Cox is looking his way and get Rhett Chambers the ball. He's been pretty reliable. Obregon's another guy. This offensive line, though, Mars, to me is what stirs the pot for this offense. They have weapons. We knew they had weapons coming in, but this offensive line, has been really strong. And I do think, again, when Mamaroneck goes into the spread, we've seen North Rockland kind of go into that 3-3 defense, and they want to send linebackers, create some penetration. So this offensive line is going to have to be smart. They're going to have to know where the pressure's coming. They're going to have to be smart with their keys, especially in pass protection. And Mamaroneck's going to have to attack man coverage. I mean, we're interested to see what North Rockland does in their coverages. Are they going to come into man? Are they going to try to stunt a little bit more to try to stop the run? If they stay in 3-3 and try to max coverage, it'll leave opportunities to run the football, right? So, again, Mamaroneck has to kind of identify that and attack the weakness, which is either if they stay in that 3-3 and not bringing pressure and those linebackers are sitting, you have to run it, right? If they're coming, try to hit the man-to-man coverages and probably throw out of the backfield. Defensively, this unit has been strong overall, Mars. They're tied for second in points allowed as well. The defensive line with guys like Bennett has been really good. Their linebackers and Ramsey, they have DBs in Alvarado and Alker who've been making plays all season long. They have a bunch of dudes out there that have been pretty efficient. And again, you're going up against the spread. North Rockland really likes to attack the edges of the defense. And their running game is starting to pick up. So I do think that's the emphasis, right, for North Rockland. Running the football out of the spread looks right now, and pass is the complement to that. So I do think Mamaroneck, that front seven really has to step up. What are your thoughts on Mamaroneck, Mars?
Yeah, Mamaroneck looks like they are fulfilling your overall season bet of being the top offense in Section 1AA because they are dominating when it comes to the offensive end. They have a lot of options. I think Cox has been playing very well. And he has a lot of weapons in the backfield and as well as on the outside. And I think he's been utilizing all the talent around him, and they've just been racking up points. I think that's kind of the key thing. And the offense, like you said, I think the offensive line, even with all that, the skill players being very good, the offensive line has been very impressive this season so far. And I think that's going to be the kind of key thing this game. Because like you said, North Rockland's not one of those teams that likes to sit back, right? They like to kind of come with the heat. And I think at the end of the day, if the offensive line of Mamaroneck can step up, and they can slow this down, and you get a lot of those, like you said, one-on-one matchup with some of your key weapons on the outside. I think guys can have a day, and I think that's going to be the key thing for this game from Mamaroneck. Really slow down these blitzes and stunts, and I think you'll be able to make a lot of plays on the offensive end. Defensively, like you said, they've been very good too. I think the front seven is going to be really the question, right? Can they limit the amount of outside runs and big plays that North Rockland is going to try to hit? If you can, get your offense back on the field, I think you're just going to rack up the points.
Yeah, let's move to North Rockland. They've won 2 straight, Mars. Offensively, you feel like, again, we were talking about a couple weeks ago how inconsistent North Rockland offense is. They've been getting a little bit better. I mean, they've scored 20-plus points now in 2 straight. Last week, they rushed for 189 yards. To me, it starts with their running backs. Savort, he had a really strong game last week. 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. This kid is a very talented young man who runs hard, and when he gets an open field, there's not many who can catch him. And I do think, again, getting a bunch of touches is good for him, but he's not alone. I mean, their quarterback, Italiano, is a key part of this offense. He had a rushing touchdown last week. Limiting turnovers, making smart decisions, being efficient in the passing game is going to be huge. I mean, they like to use his legs to run as well. And again, I think running the ball to open up the passing game is to me, North Rockland's best options for now. Because, I mean, they do have weapons. I mean, Becker, he had 48 yards rushing last week. They love giving him jet sweeps to the outside. They have Farrar, who has 2 receiving touchdowns this year. He's a weapon out there. Vasquez is another running back. I mean, they have weapons, but to me, I think when they get into a rhythm is when they start getting a running game going, which opens things up for this offense. Defensively, though, Mars, it's been a pretty strong unit. They're number 4 in points allowed out of the 14 schools in AA. But the question is, what are you going to try to take away, right? It's hard to take away both. You have that rush attack of Mamaroneck or that pass attack. So I'm interested to see how North Rockland schemes against Mamaroneck when they come out in different looks and how they attack it. I mentioned 3-3 is what we've seen coming out of the spread, how North Rockland likes to attack it. But there's a lot of different things you can do out of the 3-3, right? So I'm interested to see what's going to happen. Visciano, he has 61 tackles for North Rockland. He's leading the team. He's going to have to be very active. Becker's another guy, 10 tackles last week in INT. Really important player for them. Vite, he has 3 pass deflections, a fumble recovery. Hernandez, another active player. Farrar, to me, is one of probably their best outside defender to cover guys. So I'm interested to see where they put him and what receiver on him. He has an INT and 2 pass deflections this season. Mars, what are your thoughts on North Rockland?
Yeah, I think when you look at North Rockland, I think the key thing to their success here is going to be the run game. I feel like that at the end of the day, if they can establish some run, just a consistent run game where they limit turnovers and they limit penalties, they'll have more of a kind of a control over the pacing, right? Your goal is to try to not allow for Mamaroneck to get back on the field because their offense is just so lethal, right? If you can control the pace of the game and really slow it down in your favor, you're going to have a lot more advantages here because North Rockland has weapons too, right? The question is just going to be, how many weapons do you have compared to Mamaroneck, especially on the offensive end? And I think defensively, like you said, I think that they've been doing very well, but Mamaroneck's a really tough opponent. It's like you're going to have to pick your poison, in my opinion. You have to pick which side that you're going to have to give in a little bit to try to make some plays. And to be honest, I feel like I'd rather kind of focus on the secondary because I think North Rockland has some solid guys up front. And I think if they can limit the big plays and Mamaroneck's run game, then at least then the secondary can try to really limit the big pass plays. So I think it's going to be a really tough call, but I think that's what I would do because I think the front seven in this game is the key to success. If North Rockland's front seven can play and they can limit the big time runs, then at least it'll be more of a closer game than I think a lot of people are predicting.
Well, for my matchup in this game, I'm actually thinking they're going to do the opposite of what you said. I actually think, the focus is going to be to try to stop Mamaroneck's rush attack. And at times, they're going to put their secondary on an island. So my matchup is Mamaroneck wide receivers versus North Rockland secondary is going to be the key matchup in this one. Let's go to the next game, Mars. Ossining, 3-2, 2-1 in league play at Rochelle, who's 3-2 and 2-1 in league play. We mentioned all those teams tied up at 2-1. This is a big league game. Ossining won versus White Plains in a thrilling performance. Rochelle won versus Scarsdale, and I know that was a bit of an upset last week. Rochelle is 2-0 versus Ossining. They last played, though, in 2015, so it's been 7 years since these two teams have played. And let's start with Ossining, Mars. They have won 2 straight offensively. This is the number 6 offense in points scored. They have run the ball really well out of the wing T. And obviously that's the formula. They want to run the ball. They want to get out on the edge, which Scarsdale did have some success versus Rochelle at getting out on the edge. And I would imagine that's what Ossining wants to attack. It's going to be hard running in between the guards or in between the tackles at times. But I tell you what, Anthony LaFaro, their running back for Ossining, he has had a really strong start to the season. He had a 40-yard touchdown last week. He's been a real bell cow for this offense, but he's not the only one. I mean, they've had other guys step up. Nick Gallery had a touchdown last week. Vinny Stella also had a rushing touchdown. Their quarterback Bino has been a real strong performer. Quarterbacking this wing T offense, where you have to make reads and you have to make smart decisions. And you have to be good at play action is going to be another thing. They have to attack the edge of Rochelle's defense. Rochelle's going to outsize them. And again, Rochelle has speed, right? But you have to test the discipline of the secondary off of play action and try to get to the outside. And again, once you break contain, you got to get north and south, right? You can't keep running east and west. You have to do it. Again, it's hard to describe, on this. But again, once you break contain, that first contain, get north and south, get as many yards as you can. Defensively, this is kind of where the struggle has been for Ossining a little bit. They're number 11 out of 14 teams in points allowed. They've given up 34-plus points 3 of the last 4 games, right? Last week, they gave up 3 passing touchdowns. You have to be a little concerned, right, going up against Luzzy and Rochelle. They're going to need the secondary to step up. It's going to be really important. Again, interested to see if they can generate a pass rush from the front 7 or even the front 4 and maybe give some help to the secondary. But you have guys like Medina in that Ossining that are going to have their hands full. I mean, Rochelle's got some speedy receivers, and I would imagine Rochelle's going to try to attack them passing the ball. Mars, what are your thoughts on Ossining?
Yeah, I think Ossining offensively has been very good. I think the fact that they've been running the ball as well as they have in the wing T style has been, really a benefit to them in the long run. They've been controlling the pace of games. They've just been rambling the ball, and they've just been kind of just dominating up front too. I think the offensive line has been playing very well for the most part. And I think that when you look at it in Rochelle, I agree with you. I think the key thing is going to be about starting the run, setting up on, especially getting to the edge, getting to the outside, and maybe setting up some play action to really see if these corners bite, right? And I think that's going to be kind of what opens up the game a lot more for this offense. Defensively, I think the key thing, the difficult part is going to be you're going up against Luzzy, right? I think Luzzy is a playmaker. He has a lot of things that he can go for him, a lot of skills and ability. So the question is going to be, can you set some pass rush to kind of slow him down or at least cause him to make a mistake, right? And if they can do that, then I think that it will at least make this game competitive to see which offense can get everything going more often than the other.
When we go to Rochelle, Mars, I thought last week was a really important game for them. They won and beat Scarsdale, and they mentioned it was a pride game in the articles after the game. They discussed, this was they got really humbled versus John Jay. Coming back to win that game after being down most of the game is an important one. And to me, offensively, again, it's been a bit inconsistent offensively. But what I liked was the pass attack struggled last week. I mean, Luzzy was 7-19 for 100 yards and a touchdown. Not as efficient as he usually is, right? And Taylor Redd, he had that receiving touchdown. But what I love is that they turned to the running game, and the running game came through. Raiden Davis Mars, 170 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. He was really big for them. And that's important because that shows, again, balance, right? If one thing's not working, you have to turn to something else and find success. And that's important for Rochelle going forward, right? So I do think, hey, if the rush attack's not working this week, what can they turn to? Hopefully their passing attack can be more efficient, right? So I think that's really important. I think they're going to have opportunities to pass the ball this week. Dawson's a guy, he had 68 yards receiving last week. We mentioned about Red had a receiving touchdown. Hester, another weapon for them at the receiving end. But hey, if that's not working, get the ball to Raiden Davis. I mean, he is another explosive football player for them. Now, he did have that fumble, which wasn't good. But again, really strong performance from him. And that combination could prove to be really good if that offensive line can hold up. And that's obviously a question as well, but they'll have a size advantage. Defensively, the bad news last week, and again, when you play Scarsdale, the numbers are a bit skewed because they always like to run the ball. They did give up almost 200 yards rushing, right? So they have to be better against the run, especially against this wing T offense. They did force 3 turnovers, though, which were a huge benefit for them. They had a defensive touchdown. Lee Hester had a 70-yard fumble recovery for a touchdown, which was huge. Raiden Davis had an INT. Bryce Miller had that INT at the end of the game to seal it. Jonah Ella is another guy who made a lot of plays for them out on the edge. And so when you look at this defense, this front seven is going to have to be very active, right? I mentioned Jonah Ella, the Benitez in the defensive line, Taylor Redd at the linebacker spot. They're going to have to be very active against this wing team. They're going to have to make, good reads, attack downhill. And this secondary, again, forced turnovers last week. Can they do it again this time around? If they get Ossining behind the chains, puts them in an uncomfortable situation, which is forcing them to pass when they don't want to. It's going to be interesting, Morris. What are your thoughts on Rochelle?
Yeah, I mean, Rochelle obviously had a really important game last week against Scarsdale. And, if they lost the game, I feel like that would have been over. It would have been done to really try to make a comeback and try to get back into the playoff race itself. But they had a good game, right? The key thing, like you said, it was, it looks like they're trying to focus too much on one side of the ball, right? I mean, one side of the offense, where it's like one game they'll have like, hey, we'll try to focus all on pass. But Rochelle has always been known as the team that established the run, get their run game going, and then that's really where everything else starts to open up. So that's what they did against Scarsdale, and I think that they did it so well that allowed them to really control the pacing here. And I think that their offensive line stepped up really a lot. And that was kind of like what we said last week in our week discussion. We said, hey, Rochelle's offensive line needs to really step it up big time in order for them to control the line of scrimmage. Defensively, I think you said it right. The key thing Rochelle's defense has always had was really that turnover ability and really the big play ability, because they've always been the quickest team around. But the only fear that they have at this moment is, can they stop the run, right? Because obviously when you're looking up in this game against Ossining, they're really going to be running the ball all the time, right? So if they can't stop the run, it's going to have a lot of problems defensively. So they need to really establish a rush defense and slow this Ossining offense down.
Yeah, and the passing offense might be more open this week, but this is what I'm talking about. 19 attempts for Luzzy, 21 carries for Raiden Davis, right? That's pretty good balance right there. And you'll give or take a couple of carries, but that's pretty good balance. My matchup to watch, Mars, obviously we talked about this Ossining rush attack versus the defensive line and linebackers of Rochelle, to me, is going to be the biggest matchup to watch. Let's go to the next matchup, Mars. Mount Vernon, 3-1 in league play at Carmel, who's 4-0 and 3-0 in league play. Mount Vernon won versus Suffern last week in another thrilling game. Carmel won in pretty much a statement game versus Arlington and a beatdown. And Mount Vernon, though, Mars, this is an interesting stat. Mount Vernon is 3-2 versus Carmel since 2004. But the last time they played was in 2014 when Carmel won. So it's been a while. Let's start with Mount Vernon. They've won 3 straight games, Mars. Offensively, they're tied for number 7 in points scored. They like to mix it up. I mean, I think you're going to see some 2-back looks, some gun, some pistol. They'll bring in some tight end, and they'll go into some spread pistol. And listen, Mount Vernon has speed, and they can hit the big play. And last week, what I saw is that they ran with some power with Nazir John, who was really important for them running the football. Him and Jaden Hamilton really carried the load running, but they have the ability to hit some big pass plays. And that, to me, Carmel has shown at times that they can give up big pass plays. I mean, we've seen it a couple times. Carmel's been very hard to run against consistently. And at times, they can lock you down, but there are moments where you can hit big pass plays. And we've seen, Yonkers Force hit one. We've seen Arlington hit a couple, right? There are opportunities there. We've seen Rochelle hit a couple, right? So very strong defensive unit, but, there are times to hit him. And I think Mount Vernon is going to try to test it. And so quarterback Dieter is going to be really important in this game. He's going to have to be smart in his decision-making. He's going to be facing some pressure, so he's got to be smart in that. But they have weapons. Boyd is a really important weapon for them on the outside. I mentioned Jaden Hamilton, Mars, running the ball. He had 95 yards and a touchdown. He had a touchdown in each phase of the game. He had a running touchdown, kick return touchdown, 2 INTs, and one of them was for a touchdown. I mean, this guy in open field is deadly. Vassel's another guy running the ball. And obviously Nazir John running the ball and playing tight end. They have some weapons. And when they get in the open field, they can make some plays. Now, the question to me is this offensive line, right? Carmel, they're big and strong up front, and they're going to want to generate pressure. How is this O-line going to handle it is going to be important. Defensively, Mars, they're tied for 6th in points allowed defensively. So Mount Vernon has been pretty balanced on both sides of the ball. Guys like Vassell and Nazir John in that front 7 has really stepped up and helped this team make some plays. And there were times that they gave up long drives to Suffern, but they made the plays necessary to win that game. I mean, I mentioned Hamilton had an INT. Boyd makes plays on that back end as a DB. Mount Vernon has playmakers, right? So there might not be a lot of depth for Mount Vernon, but they have some playmakers. What are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, Mount Vernon for sure is definitely, like I said before, one of the surprise teams in my opinion. I feel like they were, I predicted them to win, I think around twice, and I was right on both of those times. But their offense has been very good. I think that I like the way that they've been playing. They've been very efficient. They've limited any of the penalties and mistakes that usually have caused Mount Vernon to suffer in previous games in the past. But their offense has just been very good because they have a lot of weapons that can make big plays, especially when they give them space, right? And I think that's kind of the key thing that they have to do. And I agree with you. I think Carmel has struggled to really stop the pass offense consistently, especially when it comes to little mistakes that secondary might have. And that causes really, I think the concern is that Mount Vernon might try to exploit this. I think that would be kind of the smart move here, is hey, target some of these matchups, because Carmel's going to send the heat. So if the offensive line can withstand Carmel's blitzes and stunts, then obviously it's going to cause a difficult time for the secondary of Carmel to really withstand this barrage of passes if they can really pull off. And defensively, I agree with you. I think that the difficulty that Mount Vernon's going to have is really trying to limiting the rush offense of Carmel. Carmel really can just run the ball on anybody, and we all thought that Arlington would kind of hold off this rush offense of Carmel because they have the bodies and size, right? But it seemed like it didn't matter, right? Carmel kind of just carved through everything, and at the end of the day, I think that's going to be the struggle that Mount Vernon has. Can they limit the big plays on the run? And that I think that's going to be the toughest spot for them.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. Going to Carmel, Mars, the big question, obviously Carmel made a statement last week, right? That there's no question about that. But the question I have is, how do they respond after a huge win, right? I thought we saw earlier in the year when they had a huge win on the road versus New Rochelle. The following week, they came out flat. And so they had a huge win now versus Arlington. How do they come out this week, right? Do they come out flat like they did a couple weeks ago, or do they come out focused, right? So that's obviously a huge question. And offensively, Mars, Carmel's the number one team in points scored so far this season. They had 577 yards last week versus Arlington, including 445 yards rushing. Obviously, when you run for 445 yards, Mars, you have to start with the offensive line. And the offensive line deserves a lot of credit, moving bodies, the fullbacks, the wide receivers. That means everyone is involved, and they're getting a hat on a hat, and they're driving people. I mean, there's no question about it. You turn on the tape, and that's what you're seeing, right? Offensive line deserves a boatload of credit. They shuffle in guys. It's not just 5 of the same people that are out there. They shuffle in some offensive linemen. So a lot of credit to that offensive line and the coaching there. And they have a running backs who can make plays, right? Keating had 119 yards rushing last week. Worley had 169 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. Rosafort over 100 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns as well. I mean, they have a couple backs now who, again, can really make some plays with you, especially with Keating coming back. And quarterback Gay has been improving, Mars. I mean, he has been efficient. He has made some smart decisions, and he's made some nice throws. Guys to Santiago, Neri, Storin, they, like Carmel has weapons, right? It's the details. If they focus in and lock in, we've seen it. I mean, you saw it last week. When you focus in and lock in, they can make plays, right? And you saw that, especially running the ball. But how are they going to handle Mount Vernon blitzes? Mount Vernon likes to bring people. They're not going to just sit back. They also have some size. So can Carmel, again, communicate? Can they continue to prevent negative plays, get them into second and third and long, right? Because Carmel's done a really good job of staying ahead of the chains, which has been really important for their offense. Defensively, Mars, they're tied for second in points allowed, right? So this has been a strong, again, offense has been strong, defense has been strong. But what has hurt them was, again, some big pass plays, and some of it has been blown coverages. Some of it has just been not finishing plays, right? So it's just kind of been a mix of things. And this secondary does have talent. It's not, it's just, hey, getting on the same page. And sometimes you see that with inexperienced players at times. That's something they know that they could be better at and correct. But what the good thing is, this defense is hard to run against, right? They're hard to run against consistently. We've seen that all season long. And they also force turnovers. They had 2 turnovers last week, Mars. Had a fumble recovery for a touchdown. Actually, they had 3 turnovers. They blocked a punt that was for a touchdown as well. So, they have some, the big focus for Carmel is preventing big plays, right? That's got to be the number one focus. Prevent big chunk plays, right? Force Mount Vernon to drive down the field on you, running the ball, and see if they could do it, right? That's got to be the big thing. Don't give up big pass plays. Try to force some negative plays, and then you can just say, okay, let's hunt for that ball and cause a turnover. What are your thoughts, Mars?
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you're looking at Carmel's offense, they put on literally a clinic last week. I mean, the overall score was, what was the final score? It was 62 to
21, right?
Yeah, 62 to 21. And I know that some of those scores, I know one of them came from a defensive side point of view as well, but
yep, and a punt block.
And a punt block, but that's a lot of points, man. And offense, even with that being said, offense scored a lot, right? And that was against a generally a very good sized defense from Arlington. So the question, I don't think the Carmel can't score points here. I think we all know they can. We all know they can run the ball. The question is going to be about how efficiently can they do that against, like you said, against the blitzes and the stunts. Because I don't think any team's going to sit back and say, all right, let's just let Carmel, run the ball. Because we know that Carmel that's their main thing, is going to run the ball first and hit with play action pass. So Mamaroneck is going to send the heat. And if your offensive line can step up and really open up the lanes still, then I think Carmel's rush offense is going to have a day. And obviously play action is going to be really good. So if they can do that, they can establish the run here. Defensively, like I said, second in points allowed. And I think the only reason why they aren't first is because of the fact that there were some blown coverages on the secondary side.
Absolutely.
And that was the key thing. I think it's the small mistakes that can amount to something, right?
Yeah.
I think when you look at early in the season, Carmel had some difficulties against Yonkers force. And a lot of it had to do with really the secondary just struggling.
Lining up correctly.
Just lining up correctly and just not making up those small mistakes that really can hurt anyone in the secondary. So the question is going to be, is this going to be the efficient secondary of Carmel, or is it going to be the non-efficient secondary of Carmel? Because we see what happens when they're not efficient, like what happened with Yonkers Force when it was a close game. And then we see what happens when they are efficient, and look at the score from Arlington in previous games against RCK, like we've seen, efficiency, right? It's just, can they be efficient?
And again, you see this again, first 4 weeks of the season, you see this from a team trying to replace 8 starters on defense, right? I mean, this is just the reality, right? But it's just those things that, hey, that they can improve on, right? That's going to be the big thing. My matchup to watch is the Mount Vernon wide receivers versus this Carmel DBs. I mean, I think this is going to be an extremely important game for the Carmel DBs to, step up. And these Mount Vernon wide receivers, Hamilton and Boyd, I mean, Hamilton's in the backfield, but they move him out to wide as well. They got some dudes. So it's going to be an interesting matchup. Let's go to the game of the week, Mars. John Jay East Fishkill 3-1, 2-1 in league play at Scarsdale, who's 3-1, 2-1 in league play. Huge league game. John Jay East Fishkill won versus their rival RCK last week. Scarsdale lost at Rochelle. John Jay East Fishkill is 5-2 versus Scarsdale, but the last time they played, they lost. Scarsdale won 21-7 last season. Let's start with East Fishkill, Mars. Listen, haven't played a lot of road games. Obviously, this is their second road game. They're 3-0 at home, Mars, 0-1 on the road. Offensively, this is the number 3 team in points scored, and it all starts with their quarterback, Feliciano. I mean, he is the guy they put a lot on. He's going to run the ball. He's going to pass the ball. He had 187 yards passing, 40 yards rushing, 3 rushing touchdowns last week. And, he's a dynamic player. He's becoming a well-known player now in AA, and he's a dynamic guy, can hurt you both with his arm and his legs. They like to spread you out. They like to get the ball to people in space, but he's the orchestrator. And Rossi had a rushing touchdown last week. Crouch is another guy who could throw out of the backfield and run the ball. He had 57 yards rushing. But you're going to see, I think, heavy quarterback runs, mix it up with some of the quick stuff, and the screen game is going to be huge. And then the play-action pass where they want to go deep. You'll see some deep crossers. You'll see, again, some play-action pass to try to take some deep shots. But I think the screen game is, they're again, you're seeing the classic East Fishkill screen game, and it is strong again this season. But they're going to try to get their ball to weapons like Martini down the field. Scarsdale gave up about 200 yards rushing last week. So I think you're going to see him try to run the ball, see if they can muscle him. Defensively, Mars, this is the number 1 defense in points allowed, John Jay East Fishkill. So you got to give them a lot of credit. They've been really strong. I think they've had 3 shutouts so far this season. They forced 3 INTs last week, 2 by Feliciano, 1 by Rossi. And this front 7 has really gotten after the quarterback, which has been really important. They've gotten after the quarterback. They've generated a lot of negative plays. Martini, Crouch, Vanderstuff has been leading the way. This is an attack-style defense. They're going to bring their linebackers, but can they protect the edge, right? Scarsdale does a really good job of getting to the outside. They have speed. If you're sending these linebackers, you got to make sure you don't break contain, because that's when bad things can happen. It's going to be huge to try to slow down the rush attack of Scarsdale, especially by their quarterback. Mars, what are your thoughts on East Fishkill?
Yeah, I think East Fishkill is definitely one of those teams that's just been offensively and defensively just been up there, right? I think I said this before, but they've become one of those teams to beat. And Mamaroneck has been also as well with Carmel. All those teams right now, I think John Jay East Fishkill has, I think, a lot of, defensively, they've just been more efficient than everyone else. I mean, like you said, 3 shutouts so far this season. Yep. That's rare to see that. And the fact is, John Jay is offensively has just been rocking. I think they've been, being able to run the ball. I think the quarterback is just a pure athlete, can do pass and run with him. And on top of that, like you said, the old classic John Jay East Fishkill screen game is back in full force. They've been kind of dominating on those, every type of screen you can think of, they have, right? Because that's what John Jay's always been known for, was when you think you have a chance to stop them on a 3rd down and something, all of a sudden a screen shows up and it just changes the game completely. So John Jay has been very efficient on the offensive end, trying to run the ball. Defensively, they just been, I think, extremely efficient, just limiting any sort of bend, right? They've just been closing down on any major progressive drive. But the question is going to be whether or not they can really continue doing that against Scarsdale.
Yeah, and what I like about their screen game is they have multiple screens, right? Wide receiver screens, running back screens, and they can attack different levels. Let's go to Scarsdale. And last week, Mars, they had that tough loss. They led most of the game last week against Rochelle. And Coach talked about, he kind of he let the team have it after the game. They said too many mistakes, and he talked about the prep before the game wasn't good enough, and that's what led to that game. I'm expecting Scarsdale to respond to that this week. And listen, offensively, what really killed them, and again, if Coach talked about mistakes, 3 turnovers. 3 turnovers were big. Quarterback Baldwin obviously is one of the best players in this class. He deserves that kind of respect. I mean, he had 163 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns, but 5 of 10 passing, 63 yards, 2 INTs, which ended up being huge ones. This is the number 4 offense in points scored. He's obviously a huge component of this offense. They're going to do some of the option stuff, but they're also going to do some of the spread stuff. I like some of their kind of play action pass, getting Baldwin out on the edge and kind of giving them a run pass option. I like some of the stuff they did that last week, and I think that's going to try to continue this week. I mentioned East Fishkill. They're very aggressive. At times, you're going to see a 3-3 look when they go into the spread, and they're bringing backers, right? So I'm interested to see if Scarsdale's going to mix it up between some heavy sets and some spread stuff, but they got to get out on the edge. It's going to be hard running in between the tackles. But he's not the only one. Will Del Garicio, which I hope I said your name right, but he's another guy at the running back spot. He had 62 yards total last week and a rushing touchdown. He's another important component to this, kind of as a supplement to Baldwin. He's going to be really important. But this offensive line, Mars, they're not very big, but they can move, and they're going to have to plug up some of this aggressive style defense of John Jay's Fishkill. So how do they bounce back? How do they, kind of get a hat on a hat and drive some of these guys who are probably going to be a little bit bigger than them? It's going to be interesting. Defensively, listen, they gave up a lot of rushing yards last week. We know stopping the quarterback this week in Feliciano is going to be extremely important. Baldwin, this is why I really like Baldwin. He plays both ways. Both these quarterbacks play both ways, Mars, which is not very common in AA. But Baldwin, he forced a fumble. This defensive line is shifty, right? They're not very big, but they like to shoot gaps. They like to cause penetration, and they're going to have to stop East Fishkill in the backfield at times and get them, behind the chains, because if they just hammering, they're going to wear down. And we've seen Scarsdale now has given up over 200 yards rushing 2 straight weeks, right? So it's going to be a test, and this is going to kind of be a pride test and a toughness test for this front seven, and I think it's going to be really intriguing. So we're going to see. I thought they did a pretty good job against the pass last week. Again, Luzzy is a good quarterback for Rochelle, and they held him to be pretty inefficient. So interested to see, but you got to be aware of those screens, Mars. Got to be aware of those screens. You got to know if the lineman's not touching you, there's something wrong, right? So we're going to see how they do that. Mars, what are your thoughts on Scarsdale?
Yeah, I think Scarsdale is going to show up a more angrier team than normal. The fact is that was a really tough loss last week, and they really had the chance to really jump into the top level, right? Yeah. Because of that loss, it forced them now to be tied, and now it's going to be up to these games like this one to really decide who's going to have a higher rank, right? Yeah. And that just puts more pressure on your guys. But I do agree. I think that Scarsdale had a lot of turnovers, a lot of mistakes, and they just need to kind of be more efficient on second and third and longs, right? I feel like they've been struggling with that, and that's part of the reason why they were unable to really capitalize last week. I think they have to really just try to establish the run, get to the outside, and then try to just, like I always say this for Scarsdale, always start on the positive, right? Get the positive yards, get a little bit closer whenever it's a third and medium, will be a lot more beneficial to you rather than third and long. For defensively, I think you just have to try to limit the big plays. The big question is going to be about this front seven. Can they get a pass rush going? And like you said, beware the screen game, man. John Jay has been legendary with how they can just trick an entire defense into thinking that, oh yeah, you're about to make the play on the quarterback, and then all of a sudden, screen opens up, then it's game over. So it's going to be tough, but I want to see what happens here.
You kind of took one of my keys. My keys to the game, Mars, first one is first and third down. You talked about being ahead of the chains. I think that is huge for both teams, especially Scarsdale on offense, to get ahead on first down. They need that 3 to 4 yards on that first down. It really gets that offense jump-started so that on third down, you say medium, I say short, 3rd and 3 is very beneficial. It keeps John Jay's Fishkill on the sideline when you get those first downs going. Second one, turnovers, Mars. turnovers killed Scarsdale last week. I thought the offense moved really well, and the turnovers is really what changed the game for them. And if they're smart with the ball and not turning it over, I think they're going to have some success again this week. So interested to see. Turnovers is going to be huge. Obviously, East Fishkill has done a pretty good job of forcing turnovers, at 3 INTs forced last week. So that's going to be what's going to give there is going to be intriguing. Mars, what is kind of your matchup you're looking at for this one?
I mean, this is tough. I feel like the biggest thing I'm looking at is going to have to be, I think this defensive front seven from Scarsdale against this John J. Fishkill offensive line and backs. I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like they need to get some pass rush going. They need to get to the quarterback and really force some mistakes. And like I said before, the screen game, man. The screens are deadly if you know how to use them. And John Jay feels like they've been doing this for generations. So they really need to make sure they don't screw up on the screen passes.
My player to watch, I'm looking at Kobe Baldwin of Scarsdale. I think he is the type of player who can carry the load and win a game for you, right? And he's pretty much done that so far for Scarsdale. I want to see how he responds and bounces back from having a couple turnovers last week. And that's going to be my most intriguing player to watch. Now, before we go to the game picks, I did do a little bit of a breakdown, and I actually looked at both quarterbacks for John Jay's Fishkill and Scarsdale, and I kind of want to show the audience on some of the talents that they have. For this video, we're going to talk about the two quarterbacks in this week's Game of the Week matchup in John J. East Fishkill and Scarsdale, and some of the nice play designs the coaches have set up for their quarterbacks. And I want to start with John J. East Fishkill, and I've been very impressed with Brady Feliciano as a dual threat quarterback. He's a guy who can hurt you with his arm and his legs. And we're just going to give a couple clips. And the first one, I want to just talk about his arm and some of the nice play design that John J. East Fishkill has for him. This first play right here is going to be a throwback, right? So, we know about his athletic ability. Getting him on the move, it really makes the defense bail out towards that side. So you're going to see a couple routes on the right here. They're going to roll out to the right. You're going to see a deep drag by this backside tight end, but I love this right here. This play side tight end is going to block for 1 full second, and then he's going to release backside to this back corner, to the front pylon, excuse me. And that's where the target is. Now, for a route like this, you need to have time, right? So Brady's going to have to generate some time, and his offensive line is going to have to do a good job, right? So you're going to see this guy's dragging across. This corner is going to lock in on him and run across the field with him. As he rolls to his right, he's waiting for that tight end who's blocking to clear backside. Right? There he goes. You can see him. Brady knows where he wants to go with the ball right here, but he hasn't cleared yet, so he's going to have to buy more time. You see pressure starting to come. He's going to have to shuffle his feet back. He's not going to be able to step into this one. Look at the arm strength, right? Look at him falling back. Again, he's at the 30 when he's 29 when he's throwing this ball. He's falling backwards. He's not really stepping into it, but he has his man. And watch this throw. Again, he's got good arm talent right here. Pull him right on the dot. I love that. Look at him falling back. Can't step into it. Look at the placement right there. Awesome. I talked about his arm talent, but he also can run the ball. And this is a pretty standard play. It's going to be power read. They're going to motion this guy out here. They're going to be reading this end. If the end steps out, he's going to take it inside. If he closes in, he'll hand it off. Right? And again, look at him get one step right there. He steps out. Great block right inside right here, opening up this hole. And this is what I like about him, right? He can lower his shoulder and run like a tailback. Nice cut, going through that seam, and look at him power through for the touchdown. Really awesome. Let's go to the other quarterback, Kobe Baldwin of Scarsdale. I mean, this guy is a supreme athlete. And though they don't ask him to throw a lot, he does show the capability he can throw, but the real fantastic part of his game is his ability to run. And I love this play design that Scarsdale does for him. This is going to be kind of like a waggle. Right? They're going to motion this guy. They're going to fake a run sweep here, fake it to the fullback, and then they're going to roll out this way, and it's going to be a pass. You're going to see a couple of drags across. This fullback's going to go through the line to the flats. Receiver's running a pattern, and they want to get Kobe out on the edge. That's the focus. Give him kind of this run-pass option. So here he is. Fake the fullback, fake the sweep, Look at him get out on the edge right here, and this is why I like this design, right? He could pass the ball. He could throw it right here. There's a couple guys that are opening up backside. But what it does, it takes up these DBs that would normally in a design run be trying to stop the run on the outside, right? Keeping them from the edge. But because it's a pass, this run pass option, these guys have to account for these receivers, which gives more space to Kobe. And when you have this type of space, with this type of speed, big things happen. I mean, just absolutely explode. This is Rochelle. Right? He looks like he's running at a different gear than everybody. Truly tremendous speed. But it starts with that run-pass option. There's the fake, getting him out on the edge. And he could just take off. And look at that burst. But it's not just outside runs. I mean, this is a shifty guy too. He can run inside. Similar play that I showed before is a power read, right? They're going to motion this guy. If he steps out, he's going to take it inside. Now watch it. Okay. There's the fake. Again, there's not a huge hole right here. He does step a little. But he's going to show his burst and his shiftiness that he can maneuver in some tight areas. Watch him. Really nice block right there by 50. And look at the burst. Just awesome. Really excited to see these two quarterbacks duel it out against their opposing defenses. All right, Mars, let's go to the game picks. And last week I went 5-1, you went 5-2, and our friends at Lowhead went 5-2. So again, pretty good day for everybody. But let's start it up, Mars. RCK 0-4, 0-3 in league play at Arlington, who's 2-3, but 2-1 in league play. This is obviously a big rivalry game. And when I look at this one, Mars, Arlington, yeah, we talked about it before. It was an ugly game last week. It's a humbling, football is a humbling sport. But I think Arlington responds. And I do think, hey, this could be a jump start to them getting back on track. I think it does. RCK's offense is last out of the 14 teams, Mars. Arlington Resigno had to throw it 38 times last week, had 3 touchdowns, did have an INT, could have had 2 INTs. I think obviously they're going to be more balanced. I think they're going to run the ball more efficiently. And I think Resigno, who had some big-time throws last week, I think he has a strong game. I'm going Arlington. Yeah, I'm also going to go with Arlington. I feel like this is a big game to show us how Arlington really responds after really a bad loss altogether against Carmel. They have to have a big win here, and they have to kind of really set the boat afloat, right? They have to just keep it going, get the pace back again. Really just start to establish a run, and I think they'll be fine. I think you have a lot of playmakers. I think Racino's going to be fine. I just think it was a bad game, but this is their chance to try to make a comeback. I'm going on. Yeah, throwing it 38 times in the high school game is a lot. Let's go to the next game. Mamaroneck 4-0, 4-0 in league play at North Rockland was 3-2, 3-1 in league play. This is a non-league game. This is tough. North Rockland 9-0 versus Mamaroneck, Mars. They have the right juice whenever they play Mamaroneck. I like the way North Rockland has been running the ball more. Defensively, they have been solid. I mentioned, again, 4th in points allowed so far this season, but I'm going to go with Mamaroneck. I think Mamaroneck is playing good football on both sides of the ball. I know this is on the road. It's not easy to win in North Rockland, but I think Mamaroneck has enough. They're going to win it this time around. Yeah, I'm also going to go with Mamaroneck. I think that Mamaroneck has really the most efficient offense and defense right now. They've just been really going off, right? They have so many weapons that they can make big plays. I'm going with Mamaroneck. Ossining 3-2, 2-1 in league play at Rochelle, who's 3-2, also 2-1 in league play. This is another interesting matchup. Ossining has run the ball very well. You've seen some of the weapons. The question is defensively. They've given up a lot of big plays. 3 passing touchdowns given up last week. I think New Rochelle capitalized on it. I think Luzzybee's more efficient this week. I think Raiden Davis had a real spark last week. He's also going to get some carries. See some balance this week from New Rochelle. They make enough plays defensively. I'm going New Rochelle. I'm also going to go New Rochelle. I think this is the do-or-die moment for New Rochelle. They need to really win this game to kind of get back on track with momentum. I know that they had a really good game last week against Scarsdale, but at the end of the day, they need to just keep winning, right? They can't just have a win, loss, because you're not really getting any sort of momentum. But I'm going to go New Rochelle here. White Plains 0-4, 0-3 in league play at Yonkers Brave, who's 0-5, 0-4 in league play. Listen, do teams trying to get their first win, Mars? And when I looked last week, quarterback Mendez, he had 4 touchdowns last week. I believe it was 3 passing. White Plains has weapons. We know that. Offensively, they're tied for 7th in points scored. The question is defensively. I mean, defensively, they're 13th out of 14, but Yonkers Brave is 14th out of 14 in points allowed. So I think White Plains is going to make enough plays offensively. Look for Graham to have a big game. He's another versatile weapon for them, especially as a receiver. I'm going to go with White Plains here.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I think White Plains needs to have a big game here, and I think they do have some weapons to give them some open space, makes them to get a lot of yards and also some points. I'm going to go White Plains.
Suffern 1-3, 0-3 in league play. At Yonkers Force, who's 2-3, 1-1 in league play. Both these teams trying to survive. Mars loser probably gets booted out of the playoff picture. This is a tough one. I think these teams are actually pretty evenly matched. But I'm going to go with Suffern. Again, what concerns me is the injury and who's going to be available. Dorcelli, if he plays, Lou, I didn't see return. But I do think the running game with Dorcelli, if he comes back, and Joseph is going to be the factor here. I think they'll make enough plays defensively. Yonkers Force will put up some points, but Suffern will win this in a close one. I'm going Suffern.
I'm going to go Yonkers Force. I think that Yonkers Force has proven that they can keep up with some really good teams as long as they are being efficient. And I think that's what they're going to do in this game. I'm going to go Yonkers Force because I also think that the home field advantage will give them some more added momentum. I'm going Yonkers Force.
Mount Vernon 3-1. Real surprise team, 3-1 in league play. At Carmel is 4-0. 3-0 in league play. Mars, I'm not picking this one, but who do you got and why?
And this is obviously, like, when you're looking at Mount Vernon, they were a surprise team for sure. I just think Carmel's going to win here. I think Carmel just has way too much, or their rush offense has been dominant. Their pass offense has been solid too, especially with the play action. And defensively, they've just been kind of shutting down teams. But the only concern that they have is the secondary, just to make sure how efficient they can be. But even that being the case, the secondary is still the struggling group. They've been outscoring opponents by a lot of points. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, you know what? They might score a touchdown or 2 against this Carmel defense, but they've been scoring an average of 40 a game. You know what I mean? Like that's outrageous. Like that's just over the top in the number of scoring. So that being said, I'm still going Carmel.
Game of the week time. John Jay's Fishkill 3-1, 2-1 in league play. At Scarsdale 3-1, 2-1 in league play. Mars, who do you have winning and why?
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at John Jay, I think that they have a lot of skill players. They have a lot of guys that can really do well, and the fact that they're going to spread you out to try to get some more matchups in their favor is going to be really tough for any defense to stop. I think that the key thing, and for John Jay's offensive perspective, is try to develop the run and then utilize those screens. I keep talking about them, but they're so deadly if you use them right. And defensively, obviously, you really have to focus on trying to get to the pass rush, try to slow down the pacing to really cause some mistakes in the long run. Scarsdale, this is a big moment for them, right? I think that this is has to be a rebound game, like you said before, because losing a tough match out to Rochelle, we both picked Scarsdale because we said,
hey, Neuro.
Oh, you picked Neuro. Yeah, I picked Scarsdale because I was like, hey, Scarsdale really has the momentum on their side, and that game really just screwed that up. They need to really reset themselves and say, we were dominating a lot of teams, or really just winning, not dominating.
They were winning most of the game last week.
Yeah, I'm saying winning games, especially winning the tough game against Arlington, just barely losing against New Rochelle. Like, they have the ability to compete with anybody. The question is, can they just be efficient? And when I'm looking at this game, it's tough, man. This is a really good matchup between these two guys. I'm going to go with John Jay's Fishkill. I think John Jay has, the momentum right now on their side. I think John Jay also has the magical screens that just open up plays. And I think that all around, they just have a lot. I think they just have more athletes. I wouldn't be surprised if Scarsdale did win this game. I think that they have a lot of good guys too, and this is kind of like that moment they have to check themselves and say, we need to compete, we need to win. And I feel like that within itself is a tough thing to do for a high school team, right? I think John Jay, when your momentum's riding high, it's easy to just keep doing well, right? But when you got punched in the face, it really takes a lot of determination and grit for a team to say, all right, we lost a tough one, but let's pull back and let's win this week. Tough to do that. I just think John Jay's Fishkill has momentum on their side, and I think they're going to win here.
Well, listen, I think this is going to be a very good game. I actually think this is going to be a close game. I don't think John Jay's Fishkill is going to have a shutout this game. I think there's going to be some touchdowns being scored. Scarsdale, I think, is going to respond to the mistakes they made last week. They were leading most of the game last week, and coach kind of called them out after the game, and I think they're going to respond well in this one. I think Baldwin is going to hold on to the ball. They're not going to turn the ball over throwing it. But Scarsdale has to be ahead of the chains, and I do think East Fishkill has been playing some really good football since their loss to Mamaroneck. And I think it continues this week. I'm going to go John Jay as well in a close game on the road. Listen, John Jay, they have some young guys over there that haven't won a lot of big games. This is a huge game on the road. I mentioned 3-0 at home, 0-1 on the road in Scarsdale is not easy. So this is a big moment for them as well. Both these teams vying for that spot. I think close. I'm going John Jay. All right, everyone, that was our show. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We appreciate all the support. Make sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe to help out our channel. Have a great time this weekend. We'll see you all very soon.